Extreme programming (XP) is one of the several agile frameworks used by companies such as Ford Motor Company, Chrysler, and IBM to streamline their software development processes. It was introduced by software engineer Ken Beck in the 1990s. He refined XP approaches in the book Extreme Programming Explain Embrace Change. The ideas were largely developed on the C3 payroll development project at Chrysler. The approach is called extreme programming because, according to Beck, XP takes common sense principles to extreme levels. The four core values are presented as foundations of XP: communication and feedback. It is argued that the best method of communication is face to face communication. Simplicity: the simplest design that implements the user requirement should always be adapted. Responsibility: the developers are the ones who are ultimately responsible for the quality of the software. Courage: this is the courage to throw away work in which you have already invested a lot of effort and to start with a fresh design if that is what is called for. It is also the encourage to try out new ideas. After all, if they don't work out, they can be always be scrapped. The core practices of XP. The planning exercise. Previously, when we talked about increments, we meant components of the system that users would actually use. XP refers to this as release. Within these releases, code is developed in iteration periods of 1 to 4 weeks duration, during which specific features of the software are created. The planning game is the process whereby the feature to be incorporated in the next release are negotiated. Each of the features is documented in a textual description called a story that is written on a code. At the time of the next code release, any features that have not been completed will be held over. That is, time boxing is employed. Small releases. The time between releases of functionality to users should be short as possible. Beck suggests that releases should ideally take a month or two. This is compatible with Tom Glib's recommendation of a month as the ideal time for an increment with a maximum of 3 months. Metaphor. Beck suggests that when he calls the use of metaphor can do the job that system architecture does on conventional projects. In this context, architecture refers to the use of the system models such as class and collaboration diagrams to describe the system. The reader might point out that the use of the term architecture is itself a metaphor. Simple design. This is the practical implementation of the value of simplicity. Testing. Testing is done at the same time as coding. The test inputs and expected result should be scripted so that the testing can be done using automated testing tools. Two types of testings are needed. Unit testing, which focuses on the code a developer has just written. Function testing, which is user oriented and checks the correctness of a particular feature and which may involve several code units. Refactoring, a treat to the target of striving to have always the simplest design is that over time, as modifications are made to code, the structure tend to become more spaghetti-like. The answer to this is to have the courage to resist the temptation to make changes that affect as little of the code as possible and be prepared to rewrite whole section of code if this will keep the code structured. The repository of past test cases see the section immediately above can be executed to ensure that the refactoring has not introduced bugs into the application. Pair programming. All software code is written by pair of developers, one actually doing the typing and the other observing, discussing and making comments and suggestions about what the other is doing. At intervals, developers can swap the roles. Collective ownership. This is really the corollary of pair programming. The team as a whole takes collective responsibility for the code in the system. A unit of code does not belong to just one programmer, who is the only one who can modify it. Continuous integration. This is another aspect of testing practice. As changes are made to software units, integrated testers are run regularly, at least once a day, to ensure that all the components work together correctly. 40 weeks. The principle is that normally developers should not work more than 40 hours a week. It is realistic to accept that sometimes there is a need for overtime work to deal with a particular problem. But in this case, overtime should not be worked for 2 weeks in a row. Interestingly, in some case studies of the application of XP, the 40-hour rule was the only one not adhered to. On-site customers. Fast and effective communication with the user is achieved by having a user domain expert on-site with the developers. Coding standards. If code is genuinely to be shared, then there must be common accepted coding standards to support the understanding and ease of modification of the code. Limitation of XP. The successful use of XP is based on there must be ease access to user or at least a customer representative who is a domain expert. This may be difficult where developers and users belong to different organizations. Development staff need to be physically located in the same office. As users find out about how the system will work only by being presented with working version of the code. There may be communication problems if the application does not have a visual interface. For work to be sequenced into small iterations of work, it must be possible to break the system functionality into relatively small and self-contained components. Large, complex systems may initially need significant architectural effort. XP does also have some potential problems. There is a reliance on high quality developers, which makes software development vulnerable if staff turnover is significant. Even where staff retention is good, once an application has been developed and implemented, the personal knowledge of the system may decay. Having a repository of comprehensive and accurate test data and expected results may not be helpful as might be expected if the rationale for particular test cases is not documented. Some software development environments have focused on encouraging code reuse as a means of improving software development productivity. Such a policy would seem to be incompatible with XP. Thank you.